My name is Kate Alexander, and on behalf of Poetry Life and the Poetry Life Festival and Florida Studio Theater, we want to welcome you to this morning's conversation. It is my great honor to have here Mr. William Merwin. Mr. Merwin is known as the poet of our age, with a breadth of work that is astounding. We will get more into that, but he has won many, many awards, 2 Pulitzer Prize awards, and of course, the Distinguished Poet Laureate of the United States. Mr. Merwin, I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
So we're going to dive right in, and we have many students and educators watching and who will be watching this tape. So I think the first question is, how did you become a poet?
Well, I can't remember that. The beginning is lost in the place all beginnings are lost. But as long as I've remembered being me, I wanted to be a poet. And it began with hearing my mother read Tennyson's The Brook and my father reading the first section of the 6th chapter of the book of Isaiah and some of the Psalms when he was a minister. And he had a sense of language that came out only when he read scripture from the pulpit. But that was something remarkable that had come from elsewhere, and it was in his hearing. And I wanted to hear language like that. I realized that there was a different dimension of language. And even before I could write, when I was 4, I wanted to know how to hear and make language like that. And from then on, people said, "What do you want to do when you grow up? You want to be a butcher, a baker, a tailor?" I want to be a poet. I wanted my 2 ambitions when I was a child, and I still have them both, were to be an Indian and to be a poet.
And you were how old? Would you repeat that?
I was less than 4 because I couldn't read or write yet, and but I remember hearing my father rehearsing, and he stood up and read, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne high and lifted up, and his train filled the heavens. And with him were the seraphim. Each had 3 pairs of wings. With twain they covered his face, with twain they covered his feet, and with twain they did fly." Where did language like that come from? I want to hear more of that.
Yes.
And Tennyson's The Brook, I now realize, is the only poem of Tennyson that I can stand. I hate Tennyson, but I mean, I don't hate Victorian poetry. I don't like Tennyson. But that poem, I babble, babble as I flow to join the brimming river. For men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. I love that, and I loved the little Stevenson one about where go the boats, dark brown is the river, golden is the sand. Those few poems, and that bit of the King James Version were hearing language in a different way. That was just something that I was listening for all through my childhood and grabbing when I heard it. It was like hearing Birdsong and wanting to listen to it.
And were you encouraged in, that's a rare and
I don't think
deep...
anyone took it very seriously. That was all right, but that was what I always wanted to do. And then when I got a little bit older, and they said, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" I want to be a poet. "Oh, yes, but what are you going to do to make a living?" And I said, "Well, I'll find that out when the time comes, And I'm still finding it out when the time comes."
And you were writing hymns for your
Oh
father?
yeah, well it was the only kind of thing to write that I knew was to write these hymns for my father. That was the only kind of poetry that I knew. So, and you know, there were some good hymns around. I mean, Addison's "The Spacious Firmament on High and All the Blue Ethereal Sky." That's pretty. That's not so bad. Good 18th century poetry. You can hear that. Yeah, there was good hymns around, and of course I thought my fathers they should sing them in church, but they never did.
So many people and artists find their early inspiration in their religious institution, whether it's a synagogue or church or gospel. Or
Yeah, I suppose so. There are many ways it could be possible. You know, having a parent or an older person whom they admire, who believes in them, and someone who sings, or someone who recites poetry. There used to be more of those than there are now. I think that television and machines have made everything far more distant. They haven't brought them closer. They've made them farther away, and nothing is as close as sitting and talking to each other, and making mistakes and doing all those things.
Yeah, the awkwardness and the realness of communication.
The repetition that you don't, you know, you learn how not to do it, but it's sometimes essential. And that's one of the things about poetry, I think. One of the many differences between poetry and prose. Poetry, you want it to repeat.
Right.
And you want to repeat it. And prose, you don't want it to be repeated. And except you want to hear the information if you didn't get it right the first time. But it's not the prose. But the poetry, if you've heard it, you want to hear it again. Isn't that true? I mean, think of your favorite things of Shakespeare. You want to hear them over and over again until you have them by memory, and then you go on repeating them too, just because for the sheer pleasure. And that's all poetry that you love, and it goes on talking to you. I keep saying to students, memorize it out of pleasure, because by reading things over and over again until you have them by memory, and then they start talking to you, and you learn something every time you remember a poem. You can't go to sleep at night, you start lying and repeat poems, and then you go to sleep.
It's an encounter, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's an endless encounter with yourself, too.
Yes.
I mean, you know, Shakespeare's sonnets, we don't know anything about Shakespeare's love life, but he's told us a lot about our own, you know.
That's true.
And
Preface.
Hamlet's the greatest play ever written. I mean, goodness.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
and my two favorites are Hamlet and The Tempest.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Why the Tempest?
Mm.
Why the Tempest?
Well, he does what Shakespeare does over and over again. He's showing you in The Tempest, and Hamlet keeps doing it in different ways. That's why Shakespeare loves to have the play within the play. Illusion within illusion. He's saying what you're looking at is never what's there. There is no such thing as the real world.
Right.
There's only this dream that you're looking at all the time, and the dream keeps changing, getting away from you. It keeps getting away from you. And The Tempest is all about that. I mean, Prospero and this incredible figure of Prospero. And Prospero, after all, at the beginning of the play, starts out and you think, oh, we got Polonius all over again. And he talks too much, and he's kind of a dithery old guy. But he isn't. And this whole thing of, and Prospero, the great wisdom of Prospero, but Prospero also, this is the great wisdom of Shakespeare. Prospero is coming to himself all through that play, coming to himself. And so what he says, our revels are now ended, in that whole great speech. and like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, and all which it inherit, shall vanish, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded by a speech. And the marvelous thing is, he starts by saying to the young man, you look moved, my son. Be cheerful, sir. And then he gives him this speech. And by the end of the speech, Prospero is in a different place. He's already troubled by what he said. And he says, go into my cell there, and I must take a turn in the garden because my mind is troubled. And he's got to the whole point where he's going to give up all of this learning and all of these things and throw away his books and his magic and start again as nobody. And that's what's wonderful about the play. I mean, yes, there's a great wisdom in Prospero, but he's throwing that away too. That's wonderful. You don't hang on to it. You don't think, oh, I understand these things. Is that so? You don't understand them at all. You're just getting to them, and you'll never quite reach them. And that's what Shakespeare. I mean, that's the greatness of Shakespeare. I don't know of a single other poet with a vision like that. The nearest things are Blake and Yeats, and they're both in English. I mean,
well, the complexity of the human being, no one touches.
Great complexity and great simplicity at the same time.
Without judgment, too. Shakespeare.
No judgment. No. After all, I mean, look what's happening. You're playing with illusion all the time.
Right.
All of the. I mean, Miranda is played by a boy. Now, does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense at all. You have to accept that.
Right.
And just say, okay, suppose Miranda is a boy. Suppose Gertrude is. Suppose Lady Macbeth is a boy. You know, I mean, doesn't that? It takes it closer to the visionary, to the unreal, to the dream.
Absolutely, to the dream.
Yeah.
It's said that there's been not a resurgence in poetry, but the modern ear can hear it again because we're filled with so much babble on television,
Yes.
commercials, that the condensed word, we almost crave it.
It's even more than that. It's as though it comes from a different place, as it does. It comes from a completely different place. And you perk up because you hear the difference immediately.
Where does it come from?
Well, part of it, both the making of poetry and the hearing of poetry and the repetition of poetry and the pleasure of poetry come from the unknown, come not from what we know, but from what we don't know, which is the great source of everything. I mean, what we don't know is vast, so much greater than what we do know.
Yeah.
I
think that's so, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that's so, I'd like to reflect on that idea, because I think for students and teachers, not to feel that we're trained to think or trained to respond or trained to memorize, but there is an unknown that we can draw from.
Absolutely, and everything, all of the paradoxes are true about it. I mean, the unknown is like the night sky. It's vast. Each one of it sees it differently, but it's the same sky that we're all looking at. And the unknown, each one's unknown is completely individual, not the same as anyone else's, and yet they're all the same at the same time. And it's the source of everything. It's the source of every important thing that we do. It's a source of falling in love, of the things that we love, the things that we don't love, our real convictions, the things that we're absolutely sure Uh, it's ourselves. That's what it is. And the world now, as it is now, is trying to turn yourself into something else, into a commodity, into something that's replicable, that you can repeat in endless forms, and it's just like something that's being sold on television. It's not true. Each one of us is unique. There's something about each one of us which cannot be communicated, and yet which is really remarkable. And that's what makes us love poetry. That's what makes poetry come from. That's where poetry comes from. Poetry always takes us by surprise, and one of the great things about the poems that we love, we're talking about favorite poems project, the poems that we love, we go back and back to them, and they always take us by surprise, and they always leave us feeling slightly unsatisfied. Something about it has got away from us. We didn't quite get it, which is wonderful. Thoreau, one of the great prophetic voices of American culture in the 19th century. Thoreau said, "In wildness is the preservation of the world, not wilderness." And wildness, and everybody always asks, what is wildness? Wildness is that feeling that it's just got away from you, that you almost had it and it's gone. It was right there and it's really yours and you lost it. And this is true of a moment with someone you love. It's true of reading a poem of Shakespeare. It's true of any really intimate and wonderful thing in your life, isn't it? It's deeply satisfying, and yet it's not. You didn't quite get all of it. That's wildness. It's the part that got away, and that's the part that you think about for the rest of your life. You know? So in a way, it didn't get away. It's always yours. You know.
Isn't that great, mysterious unknown?
Yes, that's the thing to think about. Not what you got, but what got away. Those are the things that we try not to think about, and that's a mistake. Just as the deeply important thing in our lives is loss. We lose all the time. We lose something. I mean, I'm getting better and better at that. I mean, my eyes are getting worse, and my hearing's getting worse, and all I have to do is set something down, and I spend an hour looking for it. But every day is something lost, but every day is given to us completely fresh with everything there. Do we understand that? I don't understand it. I've never understood it. Understanding, you know, this thing that I think in the younger generation we're getting away from. So many people would say to you, until quite recently, in our culture, in the Anglophone culture, I don't read poetry because I don't understand it. And I keep saying to people, that's because you got the cart smartly in front of the horse. Poetry is not about understanding it. Poetry is about hearing it. You have to start by hearing it and liking it and loving it, and maybe you'll understand it. But Blake didn't understand the tiger. Nobody understands the tiger. The tiger is not about understanding. The tiger is about not understanding. You know, when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? That's one of the great questions in poetry, you know? Right there, and Blake's got it. Blake doesn't know the answer to it either.
He stands before
Did
the mystery.
he who made the lamb, he's talking to the tiger, did he who made the lamb make thee? What is the tiger? The tiger is what's terrifying about existence, and what is adorable about existence at the same time, what you can't do without, and what really frightens you. You can't put it down and you can't hold on to it, you know?
It's the same thing you said about not just touching it, but not able to pull.
Quite
There's a
grasp
mystery
it.
right beyond.
Yes. You know what I mean? When you finish a poem that you love and you think, it's wonderful. I got 99 and 94.5% of it, but where's the other little bit? It just got away. And,
I think for our educators and students who often really think that it's got to be the right word, they don't trust. And what I really hear you saying, William, is there's a deep trust in yourself and your own humanity.
you have to believe in that.
And to just go foraging.
I mean, you're going to make terrible mistakes and get hurt and do all of those things. Yep, it's going to happen. What are you going to do? Sort of sit down and do nothing? That's okay. Too, if you really got your soul in, you can sit there and do nothing. That's a good thing to do. Doing nothing.
If your soul is there.
If your soul is in it, doing nothing is a very good thing to do. But very few people can do that. Then they begin to get jumpy.
Well, I think in an age, as you said, with so much information and bombardment, this idea of patience, mystery.
Information. This is something to be watchful for. We don't need all that much information.
No. I was reading today that the information age is over.
Oh,
it's
Frost,
now become
Frost
the age
said,
of context.
He said, you don't want more information than you can swing, he said.
That's a good way.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I would like to ask you, for a young poet, what would you leave us with a piece of advice? A letter to a young poet, or a piece of advice to a young poet?
Well, that's a bad thing to do, probably, but I think the important, essential thing is to listen. Listen. And I know what the next question is. That's what you have to find the answer to, which is, what are you listening for? What are you listening to, and what are you listening for? Well, find out. Find out what you're listening for. Just stop doing what you're doing and listen. Do it right now. I mean, and the poetry is made from hearing. It's not made from understanding. It's made from listening. And memorizing comes from hearing, from listening. What we're listening for is voice and the sound of voices, the sound of beloved voices, the sound of terrible voices. We're listening, and we know such. This is one of the huge reasons why poetry off the page and poetry that is recited or that is read is so different. It's hearing it. So I think that poetry, the origin of poetry and the origin of language are exactly the same. The origin of language is the origin of poetry. Mm-hmm. Poetry and human language, human poetry and human language. The arrogance of the humanists saying that only human beings have language, that's absolute nonsense. Amoebas have language. They have some way of communicating to each other, and that's why there are amoebas. But every animal has a language of some kind. Our language is, we're finding out what it is all the time. And the language of poetry is language itself. The language of prose is the language of information, and that comes much later, and it's essential too. But it's not the language of poetry. The language of poetry is our deep selves and the deep self that we're listening to. And it's hearing it that matters. And you listen, and of course what you're listening for by listening is yourself. And the recognition that the self that you're listening to is at once out there and not out there. It's right now, and it's what just gets away from you right now. This is true about yourself. Where are you? You're not Kate. So who are you? Show me who you are. That's, listen and tell me who you are. that's, you're suddenly in that place where, which is, it's not a matter of understanding, it's a matter of knowing and hearing and getting it clearly.
Being present to
And
yourself.
then you can't express it. And poetry is about that, never quite being able to express it. You know.
On that note, would you read a few of your pieces for us?
Well, why don't I recite a couple of poems that have to do with dogs, because I think the connection with animals to me is essentially important with other animals. And dogs are unique in that they're a new species that made us and we made them. They domesticated us. They chose us before we chose the wolf. Those wolves chose us at the same before we chose them. And this is a blind dog. By dark, it's called. When it is time, I follow the black dog into the darkness. It is the mind of day. I can see nothing there but the black dog, the dog I know, walking ahead of me, not looking back. Oh, it is the black dog I trust now in my turn, after the years when I had all the trust of the black dog, through an age of brightness and through shadow, on into the darkness of the black dog, where the rooms of the dark were already known, and had no fear in them for the black dog, leading me carefully up the blind stairs. That's the poem about her, and there's one addressed to her when she died, called Good Night. It's a lullaby. Everybody's, maybe their parents don't sing lullabies to them anymore, but everybody's parents used to, or lucky children's parents did. Said, sleep softly, my old love, my beauty in the dark. Night is a dream we have, as you know, as you know. Sleep softly, my old love, my beauty in the dark. Night is a dream we have, as you know, as you know. Night is a dream you know, an old love in the dark around you as you go, without end, as you know. In the night where you go, sleep softly, my old love, without end in the dark, in the love that you know. So there's a whole section in the last published book of what they call small elegies. And I had to have a note because people thought they were about girlfriends and things like that. And these are all dog poems. There are more wonderful dog poems in literature than you realize. There's a great epitaph for a black Newfoundland that Byron wrote. One of the loveliest things he ever wrote, and it's and he says, "Here lies one who possessed courage without ferocity, beauty without vanity," and he runs down the list. And he said, at the end of this extraordinary and moving list, he said, all of these things which would have been sheer nonsense spoken of about a human being are only a part of the truth about a dog. This was a Newfoundland dog named Lion, and he's buried here. There are many dog poems like that. There's one on an urn that another romantic poet of Byron's age said, "O urn, let you never be taken out of this garden, because the remains that you hold are true. They contain the heart of a dog.
I think that's a very good advice for someone in school or learning that they can draw their inspiration from all around them. These aren't lofty ideas. This is bring your world deeply to you and see your world around you.
Well, and you know, the thing about the individual and society, which is a thing never really quite resolved, how it should be, and ethics is always bickering over it from one generation to the next, and trying to interfere. But this is one of the reasons why I've always been a feminist and anti-sexism, I think, of any kind. I think that one's private behavior is private. It's not the society's business. As long as one's not injuring the society or each other, it's nobody's business but the people involved. And it should be left strictly alone, except by the most intimate people who understand and are sympathetic. It's none of the society's business. But the society always wants to regulate it and to do it according to their own. And you know, in agricultural societies, it was because they believed that the necessity of having endless children was a great idea. Well, it hasn't been such a great idea because our overpopulation is a serious problem.
Will you leave us with the final poem? With one more?
Let me see if I can read one of the new ones. Here's one called The New Song. For some time I thought there was time, and that there would always be time for what I had a mind to do, and what I could imagine going back to and finding as I'd had the first time. But this time I do not know what I thought and was thinking then, what I thought I was thinking then. There is no time, yet it grows less. There is the sound of rain at night, arriving unknown in the leaves, once without before or after. Then I hear the thrush waking at daybreak, singing the new song.
Beautiful. Singing the new song and listening to your deep self, Mr. Merwin, you have left us with, I think, so many gifts that all writers, and more importantly, all human beings should be aware of. And I thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.